I've always thought of myself and have known myself to be a creative person. I grew up primarily writing and doing more performance-based art, so dance, theater, debate, giving speeches. So I never thought of myself as a visual artist, but definitely knew that I was creative. I loved reading, I loved writing, and I loved performing. It wasn't until I was in my mid-20s and I was recovering from postpartum depression, and I had gotten a new diagnosis of bipolar disorder that my therapist recommended to me that I try to find something constructive to do with my hands. She was explaining to me all of the research that shows that when we work with our hands, it's very therapeutic for us, not just mentally and emotionally, but also physically. And so she encouraged me to find something that I could make with my hands. I started playing around with the paint, and it was really cheap paint and just these little small canvas particle boards. And I remember not even using the brushes, but just putting the paint on my hands and moving it around on the canvas. And, I just remember feeling so calm afterwards, and like my mind got really quiet, and I just felt this sense of relief that I hadn't felt in a long time. And that's really how I started painting. It really just came from therapy. I think there were some experiences that I had in the military that definitely informed what I was dealing with mentally. I think it was a combination of my experiences in the military, being a single parent, and then dealing with a postpartum mood disorder. I think all of those things kind of converged into one and set the foundation for what I was going through mentally. But it was really through not even so much writing. Writing was somewhat helpful, but it was more cerebral. Painting, I started learning, was more bodily. It was more very physical for me, like the tactile, the sensory aspect of it was very regulating for my nervous system and for my mind. Painting much larger is a huge commitment. It also has brought out the performance aspect of my process. But painting has always been a very physical act for me, but painting such large-scale pieces definitely makes that more prevalent. It's a full-body experience and exercise for me. I'm stretching as far as I can go. I'm bending down. I'm getting my heart rate up. I'm pressing my body into the surface. I'm using my hands for some of these pieces. I used my feet. It's a very physically intensive, labor-intensive exercise for me. It honestly, in a lot of ways, it feels like dance for me. Writing and painting for me early on were separate. I didn't feel comfortable marrying the two together. It was actually really difficult. I remember looking at works by, for example, Cy Twombly and seeing, text, seeing his handwriting there, but I didn't really know how to integrate that into my visual work in a way that felt organic and natural for me versus just maybe me copying, doing what I've seen someone else do. So it took a long time for me to be able to bring the two together. And how I started is by there are lots of paintings earlier in my practice that are completely I've written words, but they're completely covered up. So they're under layers and layers of paint, and so no one would ever know that I put words there. For me, with the way that I paint, it's very fluid. Its movement is definitely integral to that part of the process. It also takes me back to when I was a child, having to practice my cursive handwriting. And I prefer to write things by hand. And so I think my brush strokes are a natural extension and evolution of that. And then, like I said, paired with the movement, it helps me just flow through the piece, and it keeps me very grounded in my body and less stuck up here. So when I say that painting is a very physical process for me, that's also part of it. Like, it only works when I feel it in my body. Once I start thinking about it too much, that's when the disconnect happens and I have to stop. But as long as I'm like grounded in my body and I'm flowing through the movements and I'm, like really working with the canvas, either through the brush or with my hands or with rags, that keeps me in the flow of it. Once that flow is no longer, that energy is no longer there, that's when I know that it's time to stop. It's all very intuitive. It's all very spontaneous. Stepping into this white cube project was definitely a challenge. It felt overwhelming at times. I definitely think in terms of the scale, understanding how big the paintings needed to be was probably the toughest part. But once I kind of broke it down into, okay, each panel should be this size, and then, for one piece, it should have 2 panels, or another piece should have 4. Once I saw this wall, I quickly understood that it should be 4 to 5 panels at least, right? In order to kind of take up the space. For the curvilinear wall, I wanted to do something that brought that sense of movement into the space, because this is a very rigid, square, solid cube type of space. So I wanted to bring in some movement. And so I thought about, how having something draped and long and kind of flowing down would kind of bring that in, would bring that energy in, and activate the space in the kinetic type of sense. So, it was definitely, I think the size was probably the biggest challenge, but it was a challenge that I feel pushed me to new heights and helped me to stretch beyond what I thought I could do. So you just have to attack it. I want people to develop a personal connection to it and to feel pulled into it. Painting is definitely a very therapeutic, healing, restorative practice.